My father was 59 years old when he had his first heart attack. He was 65 years old when he had his last heart attack. They were doing a procedure called angioplasty. I don't know if they even do it anymore. But that's a procedure where, because your arteries have become occluded, they would put a balloon into those arteries and try and inflate them and dilate them so blood could get through. Essentially to avoid a coronary bypass. Upon learning that my dad had an occluded artery, they started that procedure. And of course, he went into cardiac arrest. And I call him our heart surgeon, Dr. Gerald Lamole. Bless you wherever you are. Without approval from my mom, and there were no other next of kin available, Dr. Lamole made the choice to go in and operate, which, had it taken a bad turn, could have cost him his career. But Dr. Lamole was about what he did, and 5.5 hours later, after they found us, after we'd been called to the hospital and we waited it out, my father was in the recovery room. He would have 22 days of cardiac psychosis after that. And cardiac psychosis is when patients aren't emotionally prepared, mentally prepared for a procedure. And my dad in no way was. Sometimes they lapse into a very, very difficult mental state where they're essentially psychotic. And I sat at my dad's bedside every night for 22 nights. 22 nights, listening to him talk gibberish, trying to tell him stories or bring him around, if only to give him comfort, if not to snap him out of it. And one night, out of the blue, on the 22nd night, he asked me how the dog was. And I knew he was going to be okay. What an amazing thing. And there were months and months of recovery before my dad could even go home, much less drive a car, etc., etc. There's a lot of hope and healing along the way. I'm having a scotch in his honor. One of the things I hadn't done with my dad, and I was wont to do, was to share a scotch with him. And we did, and that night he said, "Wow, that tastes like medicine." But I didn't care, because I love scotch. No, I didn't care because we were having that moment. And he shared it with me, and I knew, because you know, when they have that operation, and my dad ended up having a 5-way bypass. That's the ding-dong daddy of cardiac bypass. You know they're on the clock. My father would live 7 years. He would live 7 years from that operation. And they were not easy years. Because there was something about that event, something about that incident that broke some things open. They broke open a level of emotionality. I'd never seen my father cry but one time in my life. Now he would cry 3, 4, 5 times a week. I had never seen my father use racist language. And now he couldn't stop talking about those N-words. He couldn't stop talking about how much he hated the Jews. It was a hard 7 years. And when his time came, 28 years ago, when his time came, we made amends for all the arguments over those 7 years. We made amends for the harsh words and the political rancor and the division and the enmity, and we remembered that we were father and son. And on the day that his cardiologist came into the last of many visits to the hospital, I told my father there was nothing more he could do. My father lapsed a few hours later, and before he lapsed, I just asked him, was I better than I'd been bad? And he told me, of course you are. I got that chance because of Dr. Lamole. And I'm grateful for that moment. But the days up to that date are one of the reasons why people are constantly asking me, why do you hate Donald Trump so much? My dad died in 1996, and the days up to that were laden with the first official hate monger, Rush Limbaugh, in the first reintroduction of America to the politics of hatred and fear we had in the 40s and 50s. I saw things out of my dad in those 7 years that I didn't need to know. He was my hero. He was the person who made me safe in the world. He taught me how to throw a baseball. He taught me how to throw a football. Until, of course, later I would study Terry Bradshaw, but my dad started. And in those 7 years, he taught me how hate-filled a man could be when they felt like the world was slipping away from them. And that's what Donald Trump feeds off of. Donald Trump feeds off sick, desperate, confused, angry people, like my father was. Their hatred is his fuel. And while I'm so grateful that I had that time, I'm so angry that the version of my father that came out of that surgery was hurting so much. And those are the people Donald Trump is counting on.